Hi there, and welcome to the first ever episode of Above the Clouds. This is the podcast where we talk about all the things cloud technology, and we're excited to have you with us today. I'm Daniel Humphreys, your host, and I'm joined by Ryan Kirk, the lead cloud and DevOps architect and cloud team manager for Formula One. As an expert in the field, Ryan is going to help us navigate some of the most exciting and innovative advancements in cloud technology. We'll be diving into topics like sustainability and Kubernetes, and we'll be asking some thought-provoking questions along the way. So get ready to learn, get ready to engage, and have some fun as we explore the ever-evolving world of cloud technology. Let's get started. So Ryan, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Hi then. Yes, not too bad, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. Great to have you with us today. Would you mind telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and your background to start us off?
Sure. So Ryan Kirk, as Stan said, lead cloud architect and cloud team manager at Formula One. So I've been with the company for 8 years now. It's the sort of only company I've ever worked for, and gone through sort of all layers of the stack, from sort of desktop support all the way through to kind of where I am now. Responsibilities of kind of my day-to-day really are sort of anything to do with cloud, sort of the cloud engineering platforms that Formula One run. The DevOps function as well, which sort of spreads throughout the business, both sort of on-premise and in cloud environments. And as of recently, our Kubernetes platforms, which run at our Media and Technology Centre back in Kent, trackside, and also in AWS.
Fantastic. How did you fall into the role with Formula One? Have you been a lifelong fan and went down the tech route and there was an opportunity? How did that all come together?
Yeah, so there's always that assumption that sort of everyone in F1 is like, they go in sort of these avid fans. But the funny thing is that I never was, but I fortunately had a family friend who worked in our broadcast engineering department, and when I was sort of about 16 years old, he got me in for a week's work experience, and sort of more of a T-boy, rather than an engineer, but learning the technical ropes and stuff, and then kind of went from there. Ended up doing some internships throughout the summer, graduated university with a computer science degree, and then sort of had my foot in the door, fortunately, by that point. So can't have done too badly.
No, not at all. It's great to hear that you sort of come up from that sort of grassroots, doing the runner sort of style, and then learning on the job as you go. That's fantastic. So I think what would be great to do is start off. We've got some questions here that we've got from some of the audience members who are aware of the podcast before it's even started. Of course, this is our first ever episode, so we're thrilled to have you on board. And a few of the contacts that I have in the industry are really keen to get involved and ask some questions. So quick Q&A to start us off. So. This one is starting off with, cloud technology has become increasingly important, of course, especially since the pandemic. And from what we can see, and what Formula One and of course as a flagship partner of AWS, it's very, very public knowledge that it's become increasingly important in the world of Formula One as well, from real-time data analysis to improving the fan experience, especially. How has the use of cloud technology evolved in Formula One over the past few years? And what do you see as the most exciting opportunity for cloud technology to revolutionize the sport in future?
It's a good question. So over the last few years, we found that with the partnership with AWS, that we've kind of had a bit of a steep adoption of cloud, and it's kind of converted the business to what was kind of traditionally a bit of a closed loop system. I suppose it was very secret source, and we ran it for 20 years how it ran, and that was it. However, kind of as of late, the last few years, our cloud adoption first mechanisms and thought processes mean that we look to the cloud first for a lot of our systems, and that comes from anything from scalability angles, sustainability angles. There's multiple ways that we're looking at it, which is great. I mean, in terms of the stuff that kind of we're really looking towards and will sort of revolutionize Formula One, both as a sport and also the way that we operate it, is the ability with remote production. So as you know, Formula One travels to many destinations per year. We ship huge amounts of kit and always have. Since the pandemic, we've kind of switched to more of a remote production model,
Hmm.
sort of based from the UK. We want to take that step further, and we're sort of really looking into that remote production from the cloud, so we can bring those workloads kind of whenever and wherever we're traveling to.
So, like, that actually leads on to my second question, um, quite nicely, because one of the things that I was really interested to ask is, how the championship collaborates with the race teams, sponsors, broadcasting partners, you know, in regard to the cloud technology you use. Does that enable you to manage all those different parties, all those different inputs and data points, more effectively?
It does, because of the way that the cloud is built for that sort of scalability, and just it kind of its presence just being everywhere, is that we can bring data points and expose them wherever kind of we need to. So it makes the accessibility, more the distribution side, far easier than bringing third parties into our systems to pull data. We can provide them with secure endpoints that keep them far enough away from our systems that it keeps our infosec teams happy, but also close enough that they can just pull the data when they need to. So it's incredibly useful from that aspect.
Excellent. And in the form of like a live race day, whether it's Saturday or Sunday, are you constantly talking to the race teams and their engineers and getting their data at the same time, or is that something that's already set out, and automated in a way?
Yeah, so we have throughout Formula One, throughout the race division, I suppose, or the race side of things. Um, During an event, during when we're live on air, everyone sort of both at the track and also back here are all sat on comms. We got a low latency comms mainframe, so we'll sit there on headset, and everyone is able to talk to everyone. It's kind of organized chaos is probably the term that I'd use, because everyone is just talking to everyone. You've got the directors, and if there's any kind of issues that come up, it's sort of straight on coming through the headset. In terms of the Formula One teams themselves, we have comms with them, and because we provide services, data services, video services to them, so we do have comms with them through sort of other means, so that there's a bi-directional conversation happening everywhere at any given time
Mhm.
when we're live.
Wicked. And, with that sort of collaboration in mind, and so much sensitive data, being stored and analyzed in the cloud, I imagine security is a major concern for Formula One teams and the championship itself. How does Formula One ensure that cloud infrastructure is secure? And what measures are in place to protect you against potential security threats?
So we have a great team of engineers who are sort of very focused on security, especially when it comes to dealing with any type of race data that's being exposed outside of our system. As you um, can sort of appreciate, it is very sensitive, and usually those sort of exposures do make their way onto the internet pretty quickly. So we definitely sort of we build stuff with security in mind, from sort of the foundation all the way sort of through. So that's more on the preventative side, but then we also have excuse me, we also have reactive processes as well. Lots of automation.
Mhm.
That's so sort of anything that kind of comes through, slips through the net, we will sort of remediate and report and distribute out. So everyone who needs to be aware is aware. It should have been taken care of, and if it hasn't, there's already a process that's kicked off to investigate. So from that aspect, it kind of all comes together quite nicely in the way that we can kind of lock that down and make sure that that sensitive data doesn't get where it's pushed.
All bases covered then, in a sense.
We sure try to, yeah. A lot of
Is
faces
that
though.
a lot of bases? Is that been a thing that has been a trial and error sort of approach, and when things go wrong, you've gone, right, okay, we now know that goes wrong, let's fix that? Or do you sit down once a year or once a quarter, or however many times, and think, right, what are we preempting can go wrong? Because there's so many things that potentially can obviously go wrong. It's hard to predict. How do you approach that as a lead, but also as a team?
So certainly, no company is perfect. We've all had those times which we wish we didn't have with security and cyber and all those things. So certainly there's continuous lessons learned along the way, but there's also kind of assuming the worst and preparing for the worst, and sort of just in preparing for that as well, so that rather than having a reactive situation, it's more on the preventative. So
Mhm.
sometimes it can be viewed as a sledgehammer for a walnut, but it's sometimes the way that we look at it, it's just easier not to take that risk.
Yeah, for sure. Well, a sledgehammer would definitely get the job done, right?
Precisely, yeah.
Excellent. Well, all right, folks. Well, I think what we'll do now is we'll dive straight into the main segment of the podcast. So this is above the clouds, right? So this is where we chat about what's hot in the cloud industry right now. So Ryan will be picking out 3 topics out this very, very lovely off-screen cloud-shaped hat, and be giving us a rating out of 10, based on how innovative he feels that subject is in relation to cloud. So 10 being very innovative, and the future of cloud, i.e. above the clouds, and 1 out of 10 being C-level BS and potentially a load of old waffle. So starting off with our first subject, we have got sustainability, right? So Ryan, first and foremost, sustainability, what does that mean to you?
Sustainability is a big term in F1 at the moment. So we've pledged by 2030 to be net zero carbon.
Hmm.
So our company is looking at all ways of our operation. As you can kind of imagine, it's flying lots of kit around the world. It's not that great, not that sustainable. However, we want to offset this as much as possible,
Of
and achieve
course.
net zero carbon. So the way that one of the sort of, I suppose, the ways that we can do this is by moving workloads to the cloud as much as possible, due to the sustainable models that these large cloud providers are putting forward.
Hmm.
So by moving workloads out of kind of your traditional data centers that are running 24/7, we can move into the likes of somewhere like AWS, where they can sort of show you these sustainability reports. That the compute is a lot more sustainable than the previous setup. So it's certainly, sort of from a cloud perspective, that is a huge driver for us.
And is that like one of the, like the main parts of the cloud strategy, sort of now and moving forward, in comparison to previous years?
It's certainly one of our key pillars. Yes, it's definitely one of our drivers, I feel.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I mean, it's obviously becoming a more significant concern for businesses across all industries. Um, and it's a real struggle, really, to understand, where to start in some regards. Now, how do you see cloud technology evolving to support these sustainable practices in general? And what are you finding within Formula One specifically, that is really making the biggest difference?
So I think that, so with sort of the likes of AWS, they've pledged net zero carbon by 2040, I believe. So I think that once these milestones are hit from these cloud providers, from a sustainable angle, it just makes perfect sense, because sort of any business can move their infrastructure and their systems into the cloud and automatically be net zero carbon from their system perspective. It's kind of a no-brainer.
Mm.
Within Formula One, it's not just necessarily driven by the energy that something like the cloud provides or saves. or how that's generated. For us, it will be sort of a means of, for example, reducing operations based at the track. If we can shave off 20% of the amount of infrastructure that we send to the track, because we
Hmm.
pull that into the cloud and we can process it there, then we're saving 20% on the infrastructure freight, which then goes on the back of a plane and the back of a lorry. And so it has this kind of ripple effect throughout our
Hmm.
operation. That's kind of where the real big hitting impact for us is, for sure.
And is that a new development? Is that something that you've been doing for a while? Or is that something that you're gearing up to launch? Where are you at in that journey?
Yeah, so we made a very big step last year, where we have after Abu Dhabi, we have a young drivers test, which occurs immediately after the race. So
Hmm.
sort of have Sunday as the race day, Monday is Sunday, and then Tuesday, Wednesday is the young driver test. So that's for young and aspiring drivers, where it can sort of sit in a Formula One car, and the teams will then bring in these potentials to replace or join them as reserve drivers and these sort of up and coming stars. Now, for the first time ever, we ran that operation completely out of the cloud. So that was all data processing and distribution was coming back from the track in Abu Dhabi,
Hmm.
just via a connection, and then that was then going into the clouds, being processed, being distributed, then being distributed back out to the track, so back out to the teams. And it allowed our operators, who are chief timekeepers and data engineers, etc., they were able to sit trackside operating machines in the cloud and doing what they need to do. So, I mean, that was a huge step in remote production for us, and also a huge step in the sustainability movement through reducing operations trackside using cloud technology.
I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, you keep on bringing up this remote, form of doing things, and is that something that has come about in the last few years, and has cloud technology really enabled that, or is that something that you were able to do in a roundabout way with other forms of infrastructure?
So I must admit, it wasn't. We did end up doing. We got the result we wanted. It
Mhm.
wasn't necessarily in the way that we wanted to do it, just due to the fact. So remote production was always a long-term plan of Formula One. In this day and age, it didn't make sense to ship around a 220-ton data center to every single track, to then rig it up, to power it down, put it on the back of a lorry, send it out to the next event. And after Australia 2020, when we had to cancel the race and COVID came about, the one of the reasons we were able to put a race on 3 months following was we had to redesign how we've done something for 20 years into remote production. So a 5-year plan was executed in 7 weeks, and we just tore the floorboards up with how we did everything, or every single layer of video, onboard camera, network, compute, software, the whole lot. And we redesigned it and split it around sort of 70-30, sent part of it out to the track. And
Mhm.
like most of these things, it doesn't get you don't know it works until you live on air,
Yeah,
which is the unfortunate
that's
reality
the
of our
ultimate test, right?
Yeah,
So you
exactly.
certainly
So
you certainly weren't on furlough, sipping pins in the garden with your
certainly
feet
not.
up.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But so yeah, so we ended up sort of doing this remote production, this redesign around and it was a necessity. It wasn't
Mhm.
the desirability was 5 years. This was a necessity to get Formula One back on the screens, and unfortunately, it worked. And then we sort of started that from that as our base for remote production. We then kind of went, right, okay, we're out the woods now.
Yeah.
How can we really leverage things like cloud services to really kind of get the most bang for our buck here in global distribution and processing? So that's kind of where we are now. So yeah, it was an interesting time, but I got through it.
Fantastic. I mean, some critics would argue that cloud technology is inherently sustainable, right? Um, due to the energy consumption of data centers, right? And apart from the offsetting, how do you sort of respond to that criticism, or is that really the only thing that we as a cloud industry use to respond to that?
Well, I think that the cloud vendors are sort of working around the clock, I think, to bring up their sustainability, and the pure sort of economies of scale that these vendors now have enables them to provide a platform that is quite sustainable when you compare it to an on-premise platform. And
Yeah,
I mean, migrating from the typical kind of energy save and reduction in carbon emissions for, say, moving a data center in the cloud is around 88%. So, and that's kind of on an average. And that combined with not necessarily the way that these companies are powering their systems, but also I think from a technology perspective, and there's more and more, types of everything from types of processors to the way to the cooling to everything is it's becoming higher powered at a lower emission for like all the time. So in AWS, for example, their ARM chipset, which is Graviton, which are
yeah.
they produce a lower energy rate, but at a higher processing rate for any kind of ARM workload. So I think kind of layering those two things, I think it's quite hard to say that it isn't a sustainable move. I mean, these companies are very transparent
Hmm.
with their metrics. I mean, I know through AWS you can get those metrics with your own workloads, and it sort of tells you how much or how sort of sustainable that your systems are, which also can kind of help. So, yeah, I would say that I think it is definitely much more sustainable in my opinion.
Excellent. So dials moving in the right direction.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, good stuff. I think that's a great place to finish on. So, Ryan, a historical moment. First ever above the clouds rating.
Yep.
Sustainability. How does it stack up?
I'd have to say it's a good 9. It's where everything's heading, loads of development, and it's where everyone wants to be.
Strong 9. Love it. Love it.
Mm.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. So let's crack on with topic number 2. So we are going with Kubernetes this time. So Kubernetes, I know personally that you're a big fan, or you could be correcting me here, but I've got a hunch. Kubernetes, of course, has quickly become one of the most popular uh, cluster and container management platforms in the space. What do you think it makes? What do you think makes it so attractive?
Well, I think it started with a strong foundation. I mean, it was developed by Google. When you've got a name, but sort of like that behind you, it's always a good start. But I think the way that it's been sort of adopted within the industry. I mean, there's so many ways of using something like Kubernetes. I mean, there's so many platforms that now sort of plug into it, and plugins and services, that it's an incredibly flexible tool, I think, and it's become very much the de facto for any kind of container orchestration. So I think from the combination of those, I think it's yeah, that combined, and it's one of the buzzwords in the industry. Everyone loves talking about it, so that
It's
also
a big
helps.
K word.
It is, yeah,
Everyone
exactly.
wants it. Not everyone knows what it does. It's on
Precisely.
every CV I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's it.
How has Kubernetes enabled Formula One in any way?
So I suppose for one thing, the scalability and the resiliency that the platform has is, well, we find it like brilliant for that. It it just kind of, once you get it in a way where sort of you're happy with it and the operation side of it's good, it does just work, and the processes that you can build off of the back of it is great. And it provides a platform for our developers as well, just to develop onto without having the need of our operations within sort of our IT divisions and departments. It's very self-service given once the right mechanisms are in place, and I think it's been a huge enabler for us. because we can provide and work on a platform that we sort of will just hand off, and then people can build upon it and freely develop. So from that aspect, I mean, it's provided us a lot of benefit.
And do you find, within the team that there's only a few guys who really know what they're doing with Kubernetes? I quite often find that, within teams, most people don't know what it is. They've worked next to someone who's used it, but they don't actually have that core experience. From your perspective, are you trying to get everyone involved in it and everyone to have some sort of understanding and fluency with Kubernetes, or do you think it only needs to be mastered and understood by a certain number of the team, the engineering team?
Certainly internally, we're sort of all about spreading the knowledge. From both a developer perspective as well as my team's perspective, because it just helps. Certainly, sort of within Formula One, it just helps the operation. If our software engineers know what they're looking at, they can flag issues to us rather than finding out if something's broken. It just helps that whole kind of flow of understanding. I mean, where the way that we sort of did Kubernetes is we started off very slow. We did about 18 months of development work on it before we really started rolling it out. So that enabled anyone who sort of wasn't up to speed with the platform, or took sort of slightly longer understanding the platform, to come along that journey with us. It certainly wasn't rushed in. So having that aligned knowledge was important to us. And also from a race support perspective as well, we have different engineers supporting at different races, so everyone needs to be clued up with it, that's for sure.
Excellent. Now obviously, none of us have a crystal ball, right? But how do you see Kubernetes, or how would you like to see Kubernetes evolve in the future?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think it's come a long way since its origins. I think it's become a lot more accessible. The communities have sort of really taken it on board, and they're developing sort of all this open source tools and software that sort of plug into it. And so I think it's certainly heading in the right direction in more of that sort of accessibility aspect. In terms of kind of what I'd want to see with it is probably just more integration. I think just continued increase in integration, I think is good. I would love to see more, which we are starting to see, to be fair, but kind of native cloud integration within sort of on-premise Kubernetes platforms. So AWS released EKS Anywhere, which is their Kubernetes flavor that you're able to deploy on premise, and it has all the nice integrations back into AWS. That's the sort of stuff that I really want to see, and more of that kind of hybrid feel but tight integration between Kubernetes and the cloud partners.
Well, Kubernetes and containers in general have enabled that cloud native capability. We're seeing more and more, or at least I am seeing more and more of the Kubernetes capabilities within, from a cloud perspective and cloud, born in the cloud, in that cloud native environment, being used within that hybrid on-prem. Is that something that you guys are doing at Formula One?
It is, yeah. We're so in the kind of big move to Kubernetes, it started with the cloud, just given the platform that we could consume was just there for us. So we've been running with that for a little while. However, as everything is now kind of moving towards containers, and we're sort of going very much container first for our software applications, not all of it at the moment can be stored in the cloud, but just because of stuff like latency. So we're starting to spin up Kubernetes distributions and clusters that live trackside, and our engineering faculty. So we've got sort of that hybrid feel between Kubernetes, but which we think will sort of grow, I guess, until sort of that really tight integration between those cloud vendors really does sort of come into its own.
Wicked. And what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you faced when trying to implement Kubernetes into either existing infrastructure or um, stuff that you've already got going on, or brand new stuff even?
So from an on-premise perspective, we went cloud first and then on-premise. You kind of really come to appreciate how much these cloud vendors take off of your plate with this sort of stuff, because you go to create it in an on-premise environment, and then there's all these considerations that you just don't have to worry about in the cloud. It just does it all for you. So that was certainly something, I think, that was interesting. Bit of a learning curve, that one. So yeah, so I think from that aspect, and I think one of the other challenges as well is just keeping up to speed, I think, with the developments of it, and the ways of doing things and the new frameworks that are coming out, which you've kind of got to always have you kind of always got to be on the ball with it a little bit.
Have your ear to the ground on it?
Yeah, literally, really do. And but I mean, it's bittersweet, right? It's good to have access to all of this stuff rather than not, and it only makes your operations slicker, faster, and more highly available.
Can you share any examples of how you guys have overcome those challenges, or even used Kubernetes in combination with other software and platforms and tools to come up with the ultimate solution, or or even a workaround?
So as I said, a lot of our software is kind of container first nowadays. So we have, as most companies do, we do have some sort of monolithic parts to our system that we're modernizing,
Hmm.
and Kubernetes is the, I suppose, the landing strip for those applications. So we're bringing in those older code bases, older applications and components within our system, and putting that onto Kubernetes to just allow kind of a tighter knit system that can be managed from one place, reported from one place. And I mean, that provides benefit in its own when you've got 10 things to look at instead of 50. It helps.
Excellent. So I guess that leads on to the wrap up from Kubernetes. Let's put the scores on the doors. Where do you place it?
I would say probably a 7 or an 8. I'll go. Go with
7.5.
Yeah, go 7.5. We can do points. Yeah.
Nice. Is it, and why do you give that? Why do you give it that score? Is that because it's something that's been around for a while now, and it's not truly at the forefront anymore? And could you see it going up or down, in future?
Yeah, I think it's found its feet within the industry, and although there's a lot of development all the time, just given how it's sort of been adopted worldwide, it has sort of found its feet, and it's settled compared to something like sustainability, which is in full drive at the moment.
Yeah.
So I'd say, yeah, I mean, it could go up. We might get sort of something new that it sort of brings in, and it completely changes it. But yeah, so that's a 7.5, I think, from that
So
perspective.
solid effort from Kubernetes with more potentially on the cards. Love it. Cool. Okay, cool. And then I guess that leads us on to our third and final subject for this afternoon, and we are on reverse cloud. So
Okay.
a little bit of a boogie subject in the
Yeah,
market at the moment. My favourite.
yeah,
Love a bit of controversy.
absolutely.
So can you explain, because not everyone may have come across this buzzword in the industry at the moment. Can you explain what reverse cloud means to you, Formula One, and how it differs from traditional cloud usage?
So reverse cloud is essentially moving a workload or a system that had been previously developed, deployed, or migrated into a cloud environment, and actually bringing that back out and pulling it back on premise, to either kind of what it once was, or a new environment being on premise. Yeah, so that's kind of it. That's how it sort of means internally to us as well. So
Yeah, I think that's a pretty pretty fair description of, from what I hear from other sources in the industry as well. So, do you think that the pandemic impacted the adoption of cloud, and subsequently, now that the pandemic is over, we're getting this whole buzz around reverse cloud, as a result?
Absolutely. I think that with the pandemic, there was naturally, a lot of panic for businesses to keep operations going, and
Races going.
races going. Exactly. So all manners of industries, and I think that this kind of rush caused a lot of companies to kind of throw everything into the cloud in a short space of time without really sort of doing the design and due diligence around
Mhm.
like pricing, and I think unfortunately the result you end up with technical debt or a
Yeah.
monolithic system that's just running out of the cloud and costing you a lot of money, so you don't actually get any benefit. And that's then caused a lot of companies to unfortunately bring that back out to on-prem because they're not getting any gain from it.
Do you think cloud providers are doing enough to support the industry where potentially, that mistakes were made due to the rush that you've just described, or that due diligence wasn't done, and people have probably maybe ridden the wave a little bit too much? Do you think that cloud providers are supporting them in making sure that those costs are, viable and economical for the business use cases that they have, so that they can remain in cloud, and that you almost can combat this, sort of almost like anti-cloud sentiment that we're seeing in some areas?
I think so. I think these sort of cloud providers, I mean, there's material and videos and tutorials that are put out by these cloud providers all the time on like cost optimization and engineering around efficiencies, so that and different ways of doing stuff, and splitting applications out. I think it's out there. I think it does just require the due diligence to take a look. Um, I know that sort of a lot of the cloud providers, not discourage, because today they don't, but probably advise in looking at the ways that the cloud can benefit when something's being migrated across. So rather than just a cold migrating, moving a system from A to B, it's more like, okay, well, can you leverage all these different services? And so yeah, I think it's mainly down to due diligence, and also just being in a bit of a rush, I think.
Mhm, mhm. Is there any examples or scenarios where Formula One specifically moved something into the cloud due to necessity, and now that some time has passed, and we're not under the same conditions that we were with lockdown and the pandemic, do you actually think, oh, actually, whilst we're still a cloud first, on a cloud first strategy, this aspect or this thing probably is better off not necessarily being on the cloud?
We actually haven't. We've although our cloud adoption's been quite run fast, it's each system and sort of anything we've moved into there has been quite calculated. Even during the pandemic, we don't tend to move stuff if we feel that it's either going to be moved back, or we don't sort of think that there's going to be any benefit there. So we do a lot of proof of concepting with stuff, with systems. So if we feel that our biggest enemy within Formula One is latency, everything's very
Hmm.
time critical, so
Hmm.
milliseconds do count. So
Yeah.
sometimes if we go to move a system into the clouds, we'll proof of concept it out. We might even get it running live for a small amount of time during an event,
Yeah.
and and then and then prove that out. And then if it's not viable, then we just bin the proof of concept. But we haven't had any live production based systems being pulled out of it yet.
Have you found that cloud has helped with that latency? Um, or does it not make much difference, in that regard?
So it doesn't actually make too much difference in terms of latency. The way that our connectivity provider lays out our wide area networks is we actually have a dedicated connection from the track that's back to the UK, and then cloud is kind of hooks off of that. So at the moment, no. However, in the future, definitely as we sort of want to start bringing those cloud-based workloads closer to the track, then yeah, those latency metrics are definitely what we're going to be aiming for.
Fantastic. Do you see any sort of potential drawbacks on the horizon for organizations, moving away from the cloud and going down this reverse cloud road, so to speak?
I think so, because usually one of the drivers, or the main driver that I've sort of always come across with reverse cloud, is the costings of it, which is it's a classic story. Migrate everything to the clouds, get a huge bill, come out of it, put it back out to on-prem. It's cheaper. However, I mean, to be fair to these companies that do the on-prem hardware, the technology is ever evolving. They're able to produce more compute into tighter spaces, so it's an attractive option. However, the cost that usually isn't accounted for is the amount of engineer time and engineer hours that's required on maintaining this infrastructure. So with something like reverse cloud, if you're pulling out a big system that you've had to pay for, but you haven't had to worry about that back end infrastructure, you pull that out, your cost goes down. But if you've got 10 engineers around the clock having to maintain it, then there's a bit of an opportunity cost there, I feel, which doesn't necessarily get accounted for.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I see where you're coming from. Do you think it's a secure option? Where do you think where do you think the security is better accounted for? Is that in the cloud, or is that on prem? Is it hybrid? Where are you seeing?
So I mean, it's always going to be more secure if you've got the doors locked in your own house, right? But I think that the security and compliance frameworks that these cloud providers now adhere to, and you can see all of their accreditation online. Um, it goes to show that the cloud provider side is pretty locked down, and I think that you companies don't really have anything to worry there. However, the from sort of more of an engineering side, I suppose, the vector is a bit more exposed in the clouds, because engineers can engineers can kind of make essentially wrong configuration that they might not know and expose themselves without actually knowing. So the vector there is certainly greater than an on-premise application
Hmm.
or system, sure. However, yeah, it's just one of those things. It's education, educating. If you're going cloud first, educating your engineers so that yeah, these things don't happen, and having the reporting and alerting that if they do, people are made aware so that you don't get caught out.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess that brings us to the third and final rating of the episode, reverse cloud. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I would probably say it's lower on the innovation on my cloud. What can I say?
Surprise.
Yeah, I would say that given given the jumps that these sort of hardware vendors have been able to make with on-premise hardware, and the amount of compute that they're able to stack in these smaller appliances, I'd give it a 4. I say in my eyes, it's not an innovative way to go, but I understand why people do it.
I think that's a fair calculation. Right. I think that's really cool. So out of the three, sustainability, is your top of the pop sort of thing.
Yep.
Talking about top of the pops, this brings us on to a quite a fun little segment that we've coined here at Lawrence Harvey, called Top of the Ops. So we're now seeing lots of ops out there in the industry, I'm going to have Ryan here go and tell us his favorite cloud related tech concept or practice ending in ops. There are so many floating around now, and I don't want to put any in your mouth, but just to give some examples, of course we've got DevOps, data ops, GitOps. There are so many that them just to name a few. So Ryan, hit us with your favorite ops and why it's the best thing since sliced bread, or in fact, it even makes you roll your eyes a little bit.
I'm going to pinch one of your examples there, and we'll go with GitOps. Huge,
Yes,
huge fan of GitOps. So
tell us
yeah,
why.
so it's what we built our Kubernetes platform. That's the ops that we built into that, and
Mhm.
it provides sort of end to end. It provides end to end. I don't really know how to kind of which one to nail it. I mean, it's good from a change management perspective. It's good from a configuration history perspective. You can see who made changes to what. It's the source of truth, and it can span as many environments as you want, which we find is just fantastic. It's all because we can go in and with a not that much sort of rooting around, you can see exactly what's been changed. You can see what happened last week in Formula One changes. We always look to the next race for a change.
Mhm.
So if there's something that's goes wrong, we can see okay what happened before the or what was changed before and after the race. Okay, yeah, that's tweaked. Yeah, we can roll that back. So just the capability that GitOps gives us, it takes a huge amount of burden off our hands of managing something like Kubernetes, and particularly having it multi-site as well. I feel
Yeah.
like if had we sort of not built that in from the ground up, we would sort of almost be full time managing that side of things.
And for our listeners out there who maybe have not come across GitOps before, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is more of a methodology rather than an actual technical piece of software or tool itself. If am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, that's right. It's a methodology where everything is based back in Git, so that might be GitHub or Bitbucket or something like that. So everything from all your configurations for whatever it is that you're deploying is all backed by Git. So any change that is made or any change that's desired has to
Mhm.
go through that same mechanism. There's no other ways around it, which is pretty much what it is in a nutshell.
Excellent. And where did you first hear about GitOps? Was there some guru with a pointy hat in sitting under a log that was the GitOps wizard and he told you all about it, or is it something that you were taught back in university? Where did you first hear about it?
It was a bit of the wizard in the pointy hat, I'd say. We had someone come on board and he said, guys, you got to do this, and he worked with us and for a good few years, and and here we are. So it was definitely the right call, but yeah, he was a huge fan of it, and brought that into us.
Excellent. And is that what you do in terms of, when looking at building the team or growing the team at Formula One and looking at the talent that's out there on the market? Do you look for people who maybe knows how to do things differently, or how do you approach finding the right person? Is it, like I say, someone who does something different, brings something new to the table, or is it someone who you can rely on because they know exactly how you want it to be done? Or is it a mix of, how does it
It's
work?
a mix. Yeah, I would say it was a mix. We always welcome people coming in with fresh ideas and fresh ways of doing stuff. We always say if you feel like something can be done better, do a proposal, do a proof of concept, bring it to the table, and we'll have a look at it. It's no way or system is perfect. So, if it's someone's come in with a fresh idea and it makes it better, fantastic. So I'd say it's a mixture of both. I mean, obviously we have our tools, we have our skills that we sort of do like to bring in so that it matches the profile, but also it's having sort of additional stuff is also sort of a benefit to us because it helps develop our team, our system, and our operation.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, that sort of brings us to the end of the episode. So first and foremost, thank you. We hope the listeners out there have enjoyed the conversation, brought some insights, learn a little bit about some of the most innovative buzzwords, or not so innovative in some cases, for what's going on in cloud technology. We'll be back next month with another episode, with another awesome guest. So please do tune into that. We're available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Music, and we'll be posting a recording of this on YouTube as well. If you're following Lawrence Harvey on LinkedIn, you'll get all the updates for this episode and the following episodes as well. So make sure that you like and share with your mates. Subscribe, even your little cheesy subscribe plug there, and keep an eye on those socials to keep in the loop with everything above the clouds. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us on our first episode. It's an absolute pleasure speaking to you and having you on. To finish us off, have you got a hot take to keep our guests, keep our listeners thinking beyond the episode?
Oh God, a hot take. Oh, nothing that's cheesy, unfortunately. I just say, just keep on building, keep on developing, and keep on innovating. I guess just carry on.
Pedal to the metal.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you very much for the guys at home for listening. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Ryan.
Cool.
All the best.